Hi. When I last left off with the Chevalier de St. George, he had just shamed a braggart into exiting from a drawing room full of ladies. Now, there was one more incident when he shamed someone who had challenged him to a duel. This person was the Count de la Morliere, who had taken offense to a remark made by St. George and challenged him to a duel. The Count was no match for St. George, and St. George, seeing this from the get go, eventually threw down his weapon in disgust, grabbed the Count's weapon out of his hand, and then grabbing the Count, threw him over his knee and proceeded to spank him, yelling at him like an angry father, "Shame on you for this foolishness. You could have gotten yourself killed." Now, it was written by Alexandre Dumas, the novelist, that St. George had actually backed down from a challenge that came from his father, Alexandre Dumas, the general, who was a deadly swordsman in his own right. Dumas, the novelist, claims St. George pleaded illness as his reason for not accepting the challenge. And at the time of the challenge, he might have been right, for while his father was only 22 at the time, and at the peak of his health, St. George was close to 50 and already ailing from a bladder infection. Now, there might have been another good reason for St. George declining the challenge. You see, Alexandre Dumas' reputation as a soldier at the time was so great that officers used to bid each other to get him into their units, and St. George was no exception. He outbid another officer to get Dumas into his unit, and he bid high. He wanted him badly enough, and he didn't want him dead. Now, getting back to St. George, his other attributes, let's say, he also could not be beaten in a foot race. Now, along with the violin, he also played the piano, wrote poetry and musical compositions, and they say that as an actor, he was phenomenal. He was equally as good at dancing and could mount the wildest of horses bareback and bust the bronco. He was as good a marksman as he was a swordsman, and could fire off two pistols at the same time, bringing down two swallows simultaneously. As a soldier and commander, he was unbeatable on the battlefield. As a skater, he was the most graceful in the land, in a land supreme for grace and skimming over the ice with ease as he cut figures of rhomboids, flowers, portraits, and sometimes entire lines from Racine, the Shakespeare of France. Now, when I was growing up in my neighborhood, blacks were considered to be very bad dressers, wearing loud and clashy colors. The standing joke used to be, when someone wore something that people thought too loud, how far did you have to chase him to get that? Meaning, how far did you have to chase the black man you stole that from? But the Chevalier of St. George was the fashion plate of his day, setting the fashions not only for France, but for England as well. Now, visiting England with the Duke of Chartres, his social success there equaled his success in Paris. When in England, he adopted the English hat and shoes and gave them a style of his own, which became the prevailing mode, so that the English lords used to copy his dress. Now, upon returning to France, he introduced the English style, which soon replaced the French one. He was a lavish spender and extremely generous, and came back to France 3 months later with only 200 guineas from a bet that he had won from the Prince of Wales that he could jump a wide ditch with both his knees closed. He relished in doing things most people thought impossible. Once he even performed a bit of music with just his whip, a fact that was certified by several people present, although I can't figure out how he did it. More about St. George later.